All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Countless of Vlogcast. I'm your host, Justin Rich. Today, we'll talk with mental health professional Khia Glover about mental health resources, how to get therapy, ways to cope, and a little more. So, hope you guys enjoy the show. All righty. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, tell us a little about yourself. Give us a little backstory about yourself.
Okay, so my name's Khia, and I am a licensed master social worker, soon to be licensed clinical social worker. And there's not a whole lot of difference in that other than the letters and a couple of exams. So basically, I work with children and families, and I have created Notes by Kaya as a way to educate people in my community. We've kind of shifted to doing so more for parents, and so that they can help their children have good mental health practices and be more mindful in their parenting styles. I also struggle with my own mental health issues, depression, anxiety, all those different kinds of things, which I'm really transparent about on the blog, on Instagram, all of that, because I believe that that really helps people to understand they're not alone. And just because I'm a therapist doesn't mean that I don't deal with those different kinds of issues. So,
All right. It's a good transition to the first question. So, tell us about how going to therapy helps you with mental health professional as a regular person when you're not
okay.
doing therapy.
Yeah. So, as a professional, like it gives me an opportunity to maybe talk about things that have happened in sessions. And then just on a personal level, I'm able to discuss different things going on in my life because our lives don't stop, our lives get crazy too. And so having someone that is non biased, that doesn't know everything about me, um, is really good just to decompress and, talk about what's going on.
Okay, great. So, since you have the experience of going to therapy, why would you recommend some therapy to somebody that hasn't gone or afraid to go to therapy?
Okay, so number one, there's nothing to be afraid of. But I would recommend therapy because, a lot of times people say, oh, I have my family, I have my friends, but a lot of times loved ones, they know way too much background. So when you have one certain situation happening, they might be trying to connect it to something else that you did 5 years ago, and you're like, "No, this is completely different." And so or, they're thinking about all these other things that they know about you rather than giving you fresh eyes, a fresh look at the actual situation that's going on. So, it's really just talking to someone, being able to vent, express yourself, and then also get other possible outlooks that you might be missing.
So, speaking of that a little more, though, what are some issues you find in the particularly the Black community that you can find like over and over again, and that hard to get resolved?
A lot of times it is our habits and things that we have learned over time that have been passed from generation to generation to generation with no real reason or meaning behind it. And we are people that really likes to stick to habit, to routine. Um, and so a lot of times it's like, no, but we can break these cycles. And I see depression, but for us, it is very different, like the way that depression looks, because we are trained to keep going regardless of circumstances, right? So in a non-black person or a non-minority, I might see that they're in bed all day, they're not showering, different things like that. But for us, it's like my grandma would never have that. There is no way she would have ever let me just stay in the bed all day or not shower or anything like that. So we're kind of trained a little bit differently on those things. And so I often end up teaching my clients, like, yes, this is depression. It just looks a little bit different.
Right, it's another great transition to talk about too. There's always issues that arise too, but what are some mechanisms to coping and methods to like getting better and moving forward?
Yeah, so there are so many, and really anything that makes you feel good can become a coping skill, as long as you're not overindulging to where it becomes an issue. Like eating is very easy to do that, right? But things that I like to recommend to clients and even do for myself is journaling, yoga, meditation. I know that in the Black community, a lot of times because we don't understand it or really know the background and things like that, yoga and meditation and things like that, we kind of snare our nose up to. But really, it's all about mind centering. I work a lot with my clients with deep breathing. And even though breathing seems like something natural that we do every single day, it's really about the techniques that you're using when you're breathing and making sure you're kind of slowing down, sitting in silence, and doing like that. Also, self care is really important, taking time out for yourself. It doesn't have to be like going to this $3,000 spa or anything like that. It can be just taking time, going outside away from everybody else for like 5 or 10 minutes, or I like to go on a drive. So, just different things like that can really be helpful. I absolutely love journaling because it gives you a way to let out your thoughts. And sometimes when you're writing, your hand is going a little faster than your mind, and sometimes you might end up writing something that you didn't even realize that you were thinking. And it, for a lot of people, it's a way to get things out in a different way. So those are a few of the things that I recommend.
Okay, so if you could speak a little bit on like everyday issues like racism and stuff like that too, how you cope with that too, and how you like help your clients cope with that too, if possible.
Okay. So really it's thinking about so I had my own issue with a client that made some racist remarks, particularly about how Black Lives Matter was stupid and all of this stuff. And he was only 16, so I kind of had to um, take that into consideration. But that was extremely, extremely hard for me to face it, not only as a Black person, but here I am in this professional role. And I have to remain professional while I am having this conversation with him. And that was extremely difficult. Um, but at the same time, like, I had to pray through it and, like, okay, Lord, I know that I'm in this situation for a reason. What is it? Help me make it through this conversation because I'm struggling. And I had to go right into another client. So I didn't even get to really decompress from all of that until after, I saw a whole nother client and still being able to give my 100% to that next person.
Oh, if you could talk about a little about like your strength too, how you get that strength too, because you were just saying like how you have to cope with like go to one client to another client, and that's the issue you're talking about before too, with like the community too, just moving forward too. So like, it's about like journalism too, but how do you like deal with that too? Do you put it in the back of your mind? Do you say it for later too? Do you write it down like in between that time, like 2 minutes to write it down, then come back to it?
Yeah, so in that particular situation, I didn't, because everybody was running behind that day. So um, I didn't have time to really process it at all. And I think that was a big part of what bothered me. Um, but I took a few deep breaths and I went and got the next client and just kept reminding myself while he was in there, you have to give him 100%. And then once that was over, I immediately left the office and talked to a couple of my friends and was like, oh my gosh, like this is what happened. Of course, with keeping confidentiality and all of that stuff, but I needed to get that out. I also reached out to a couple of my therapist friends to see how they've dealt with it. And I let myself cry. I let myself cry as long as I needed to. And it was a long time. So I think that's a big part of what we as Black people need to get more comfortable with is allowing yourself to feel those emotions and not pushing them down. You might have to push them down for a minute, right? Because you have work to do. We have things, we are caring for kids, all that different kind of stuff. But eventually, you need to let that out. And it even came and snuck back up like later on in the night. And I just let myself cry again. And we have to be okay with those different emotions.
And I know it's different between like women and men too, because a lot of time we suppress our emotions too, and we're told like suppress our emotions as like males, but it's like
Mhm.
women they're like told to like cry and let it out too. So if you speak on that a little bit too, with like this is like male clients and female clients too. I know you probably tell them the same advice too, but they probably receive it differently though.
Yeah, they do. But I tried, so empowerment is really what I try to center all of my work around. And making sure that person feels empowered and stronger by the words that I say to them, the work that we do together. And so, yes, I tell them, hey, you can have those moments. You deserve those moments too, even as a male. So we're shutting down all that stuff that you've learned about it being feminine to cry or whatever. We're throwing that out right now. And so even if you can't do it in front of other people, this is a safe space with me to be able to do it without judgment. So you at least have one space where you're able to do that freely, but also encouraging them to find other spaces or times to allow themselves that as well.
Okay, great. Could you speak on because we have all this stuff going on now with COVID, all that racism and all too. If you could speak on like how to receive virtual therapy too, ways to go about that too, from like beginning research, the what to look for, then research too, and then how to like what to look for actually.
Yeah, so with COVID and all of that, there is so much more access to teletherapy and doing things virtually. Um, and which is great. It's awesome. Not every therapist has liked to do it. Um, Not every client has liked it. I've had some clients that are like, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, I understand because it's difficult for me too. But there are all kinds of apps. There, a lot of times, if you've already been seeing a therapist, they might have that ability as well. So just ask them. And then while you're seeking services, whenever you are contacting someone to possibly be your therapist, ask them that right off the bat. Are you able to offer teletherapy sessions? And then, of course, there are apps and stuff that are designed specifically for that that you can use as well.
Great. So in terms of like a lot of people lost their job during this time too. If you could speak on other resources, if you got dive a little deeper, to find like paying for that and like people that like maybe have like I don't know what it's called, but the payment plans or like sliding fees.
Okay. So that's something that you can ask to. And I always say, just ask. The worst that they can tell you is no, or they can give you resources for someone else. There are so many different websites and stuff for therapists and all of that. So if you are still working and you have insurance, there's what's called an EAP, and that is Employee Assistance Program. And generally, that offers 3 to 6 sessions for free that you're able to get per issue, and that is through your insurance, through your health insurance. And so, contact your job about that if you are still working. If not, pretty much every state has community mental health agencies that a lot of times don't charge. Uh, um, or will give you like a few free sessions or whatever. So look into that. Every state has a department of mental health, and it might be called something a little different in other states, but they should be able to direct you on services that you can, or places that you can go to get those services for free or for a lower cost.
Great. So we still talked a little about the virtual world of mental health therapy. Can you speak a little more on how it's changed over the years, like the past like 2 to 3 years, is how it's changed the mental health field in general?
Okay. So the mental health field, number one, more Black people are getting into therapy. That's a major thing. Because I know growing up for me, it was like, oh, Black people don't go to therapy. Black people don't commit suicide. Like that is a white issue. Um, Black people are starting to understand that going to therapy doesn't mean that you're crazy. And I tell people that all the time. It just is another person that's helping you to get through whatever situation. And sometimes with long term therapy, they help through several different situations. And it's just another support for you. Also, we're having many more Black therapists and minority therapists come along, which is great because, as a Black person, a lot of times we deal with issues in different ways that other races don't really understand. So, for instance, the Black Lives Matter thing. Typically, with a Black therapist, you don't really have to explain a whole lot about why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. So, you are able to spend more time actually processing and dealing with that instead of going through this whole historical history lesson um, in your session. Also, there's a lot more ways to be able to get therapy. Like we were talking about, there's different apps so you can do it right at home. Um, there are a lot of people offering several different services. You can find them through Instagram. It's much easier to find. And then, of course, the shame is starting to be knocked away, which I love because there's no shame in getting therapy. There's no shame in having a mental health diagnosis at all. And going to therapy, I also want to clarify that it doesn't mean that you're going to be put on medication. You don't have to be. And also, there are different diagnoses that aren't so harsh, like depression, bipolar disorder. There are also diagnoses that we use that just deal with a family stressor. So, like parent child conflict, that might be the diagnosis that we put down. And we have to put down a diagnosis for billing purposes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be diagnosed with like schizophrenia or something. So, there's no fear. You don't have to fear those kinds of things unless those are the symptoms that you're experiencing.
Great. Can you talk a little about? Because I think going to therapy is important though. But this is important after effective therapy too. Like when you're home alone after that too, where you're like on that drive home or walk home after therapy too. So like, how can people carry that feeling of therapy positively and grow from there and progress?
Yeah. So, number one, be proud of yourself that you did it. And then also, your therapist should be making sure that when you leave that session, that you are in a much better place. That you are um, like if you had a difficult session or had to talk about some difficult things, that they are ending the session on a higher note. Also, what I recommend to clients is go home and journal and write down what your feelings are, what that session was like for you, what was the hardest part, what was the best part, what did you learn, and just doing kind of reflections on your own about your experience. I would say be careful about talking to family and friends after your therapy sessions. A lot of times they may not feel the same, especially if they have different views about therapy and what it is anyway. Um, it's not bad to talk to them about your experiences in therapy, but I've seen with my own clients that they're great when they leave the session with me, but then they go home and they talk to family, and their family's like, and they have a completely different idea. But there's, like I said in the beginning, they're seeing things from a different perspective and they're attaching all these different things and also don't necessarily have the educational background to know these different things that a therapist does.
Great. Could a little deeper topic. We talk about ways we could cope with mental health without the police or like beyond the police.
Okay.
That's a tough
Um,
one, but you gotta
yeah,
talk about it.
it is. But I will say that the majority of police officers, like, so there are what are called CIT officers. And basically, they are crisis trained to deal better. Like, say you have someone in your home that's suicidal and you call the police. you can ask specifically for a CIT officer. That person has been trained in crisis intervention, and so they know how to deal with someone who is suicidal. They know how to go into it, and typically they volunteer to be trained in this, so they have a different kind of heart about it. Um, so they're not coming in blindly, and they also want to help in those situations. Another way is to, if you already have a therapist, call them, contact them, or contact a local mental health agency and see if you can get help in other ways. But definitely, if you have to call the police, ask for that CIT officer. I believe a majority of states have them, or you can ask for someone who is crisis trained and go from there.
Great. So, you have a little experience with the mental health field. So, if you give a little advice to those young people out there, maybe studying mental health therapy in college right now, or just beginning, if you give them advice on what to look for and how to like go about it in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far as my route and getting into it, I did an undergrad. My degree was sociology, human services, and then for grad school, I did social work. Just look into what you're wanting to do. I always encourage people to look at social work because we can do so much more. People often think of LPC first, or licensed professional counselor first, and if they have to major in psychology. Um, but with social work, it's such a broad field that you can literally work anywhere. That can be for the government, you can work for hospitals, you can work in an agency and do therapy, you can work in a school. And so just look at all your options and see which one is the best fit for you. And then remember, all throughout, it's about self care and making sure you're taking care of yourself, doing what you can to not take those clients and stories that you hear and stuff like that home with you. And it's nearly impossible. But if you have your own therapist, then you can process it with them. And just being able to have those different outlets for yourself and time for yourself as well. That's the biggest thing is self care.
Great. So, it's a two-part question. Can you speak on a new normal from your perspective and advice to those people out there uncertain about their future and present time?
Yeah, so the new normal, do you mean the new normal for like as far as like COVID type stuff or new normal for mental health?
Both, because they both could tie in together. Like,
Okay.
yeah.
So, as far as mental health and new normal, I see is that we are less shameful in getting help, which is the way that it should be. There's no shame in getting help at all. We wouldn't shame people for going to the doctor. So we shouldn't shame people for going to therapy. It's the same thing. And so the new normal, I think, is more people speaking out about getting therapy and it not being like on the hush hush all the time. Um, and I really love that because it's nothing to be ashamed about. As far as COVID, I think it's really teaching us a lot of things as far as being okay with being by ourselves, being okay with being with our family members, um, learning new skills, getting new hobbies. I'm loving it. Like more people are into looking at their energy and taking more time to look like, okay, how is my house impacting my mental health? Like, let me add these plants so that I can feel more comfortable or, I can feel more alive in here. And so I think that's a really great thing that we should continue to take with us throughout. As far as going through these times, keep going. You got it. You're doing great. Even when you don't feel like you are, if you need help, if you need to talk to somebody, do it. Don't let anyone else talk you out of it. Um, it's going to be okay. I promise. Just keep going, keep striving, keep moving. Like I said, seek help if you need it. Don't be ashamed to do that. If you are feeling hopeless or anything like that, considering suicide, please, please, please reach out to someone and get some help. You don't have to go through it on your own.
Great. So, final question: say somebody goes to therapy maybe for a few months and they find it doesn't work, or they stop going. What are some other routes for in between that time? Like they don't feel like going, or don't feel like it's helping them. What are some other routes or alternatives they can look for in that time?
Okay. So, number one, I would say if you feel like the therapy isn't helping for you, to identify the reason. And it may be that you need to get a new therapist, and there's nothing wrong with that. The therapist and client should match well in order for it to work. Um, and then, are you really putting in the work that the therapist is asking you to do? If she gives you, or if she or he gives you homework, are you actually doing it? Are you implementing the things that you talk about in your sessions? Are you implementing those in everyday life? So, number one would be understanding why you feel like it's not helping and what maybe could be done differently to make that shift. Um, if you have to take a break from therapy for whatever reason, like say you did that EAP, you got your 3 sessions, and you have to wait a period of time before you can go back in for something else or whatever it might be. Continue using those coping skills that we talked about. So the deep breathing, um, and journaling, and using the things that you love to do as self-care ways to take care of yourself. And just look into how you can change your own environment. And social workers, we're all about that. Person in environment is how can you shift your environment in order to make things better and improve for you.
Great. So, for people that want to find you, or like talk to you, or ask for advice, where people will find your websites and social media tags.
Yeah, so my website is www.notesbykhia.com, and it's KHIA as you see on the screen. And I am at Notes by Khia on everything, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those. YouTube, we're moving it over. Right now, YouTube is Ms. MZKMONET. So you can find our YouTube clips there. It's also linked on my pages and all of that stuff. So that's where you can find me.
All right. I just want to thank you for coming on again and sharing your expertise and experience, and hopefully somebody out there gets help they need. And just want to thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate
No
it.
problem. This has been the Countless Vlogcast with my guest, Khia Glover, mental health professional. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys want to watch this rewatch this again, watch it on YouTube, Countless Vlogcast. And we're out. Thank you guys for watching.
Thanks.